The morning sun cast long shadows across the United Nations Plaza as 6 strange ships descended from the sky. Each vessel was different, representing the diverse species of the Galactic Council. The sleek silver craft of the Regelians landed first, followed by the crystalline structure of the Altarians, the biomechanical ship of the Centaurans, and 3 others that defied easy description. Dr. Emily Watson adjusted her glasses and checked her tablet one more time. As Earth's lead xenobiologist, she had spent years preparing for this moment. First contact protocols filled hundreds of pages, but none of them could truly prepare anyone for meeting beings from other worlds. Around her, diplomats from dozens of nations stood in nervous anticipation, their formal suits contrasting sharply with her simple lab coat. The ships opened with sounds that ranged from mechanical hisses to musical chimes. From the lead vessel emerged a tall, graceful being with pale blue skin and 4 arms. This was Ambassador Thane of the Regelian Collective, according to the preliminary communications they had received. Behind him came representatives of 5 other species, each stranger than the last. The Altarian looked like living crystal, light refracting through its transparent body in rainbow patterns. The Centauran appeared to be part organic, part machine, with metallic implants covering much of its scaled hide. The others were equally fascinating, a floating jellyfish-like creature, a being that seemed to be made of flowing sand, and something that looked like a walking tree with eyes. Ambassador Thane approached the human delegation with measured steps. When he spoke, his voice came through a translation device that hung around his neck like a pendant. "Greetings, inhabitants of the 3rd planet of Sol. I am Ambassador Thane, speaking for the Galactic Council. We have come to welcome you into galactic civilization and to offer you the gifts of our advanced society." Dr. Watson stepped forward, offering what she hoped was a friendly smile. "Welcome to Earth, Ambassador Thane. I'm Dr. Emily Watson, and on behalf of humanity, we're honored to meet you." The ambassador's expression was difficult to read, but he seemed pleased by the formal response. He gestured to one of his companions, who carried a device that looked like a glowing cube. "This is the gift of civilization," Thane announced. "Within this data crystal lies the accumulated knowledge, laws, and social structures that have brought peace and prosperity to over 10,000 worlds. Your primitive systems of government, economics, and social organization can now be replaced with our proven methods." The human diplomats exchanged glances. Dr. Watson maintained her smile, though it felt a bit forced now. "That's very generous of you, Ambassador. May we ask what these proven methods involve?" Another alien stepped forward. This one had introduced itself as Commander Vax of the military hegemony. Its voice was deeper, more forceful. "Your chaotic system of separate nations must end. The Galactic Council requires unified planetary government under our guidance. Your economic systems based on competition and unpredictable markets will be replaced with our efficient resource distribution networks." The 3rd alien, calling itself Economist Prime Kill, added in a mechanical voice, "Your entertainment, art, and cultural expressions will be standardized according to galactic norms. This will eliminate the confusion and conflict caused by diverse viewpoints." Dr. Watson felt her smile becoming more genuine, though for different reasons than the aliens might have expected. "I see. And these systems have worked well for your worlds?" "Perfectly," Thane replied with evident pride. "War, poverty, and social discord have been eliminated from all Council worlds. Crime is virtually unknown. Citizens live in harmony, following the optimal patterns we have developed over millennia." "That sounds very organized," Dr. Watson said carefully. "Could you tell us more about daily life on these worlds?" The jellyfish creature floated forward. "Citizens wake at optimal times for their biological rhythms and assigned functions. They consume nutritionally perfect meals, engage in work that matches their tested abilities, and participate in approved recreational activities. Conflicts are resolved by the Council's AI systems before they can disrupt social harmony. And everyone is happy with this arrangement? Asked Dr. Robert Kim, the UN Secretary General. Happiness is an inefficient emotional state, Commander, Vax replied. Our citizens experience contentment and purpose, which are far superior. Dr. Watson nodded thoughtfully. What about exploration, discovery, new ideas? All necessary discoveries have been made, economist Prime Chill stated. Our civilizations have reached optimal development. Change beyond minor efficiency improvements would only introduce instability. The human delegation stood quietly for a moment, processing this information. Dr. Watson looked at her colleagues, seeing the same mixture of fascination and concern in their eyes. This is all very impressive, she said finally. You've clearly achieved something remarkable. But I have to ask, what makes you think we want any of this? The question hung in the air like a strange echo. The alien delegation froze, their various forms of expression registering what could only be described as complete bewilderment. Ambassador Thane was the first to recover. I do not understand your question. We are offering you perfection, the elimination of all the problems that plague your species. Why would you not want this? Dr. Watson glanced at the other humans, seeing nods of encouragement. Well, for one thing, we've never actually asked for help with our problems. We're quite fond of solving them ourselves, even if we make mistakes along the way. But your methods are inefficient, the tree-like being interjected. Your species wastes enormous resources on conflicts, redundant research, and failed experiments. Our way eliminates this waste. True, Dr. Watson admitted. But those conflicts, redundant research, and failed experiments have also led to some of our greatest achievements. Competition between our nations drove us to explore space. Our chaotic economic systems created innovations your planned systems might never have discovered. Even our failures teach us things. The aliens looked at each other with expressions that suggested they were witnessing something unprecedented. Commander Vax stepped forward, his mechanical parts whirring. You prefer inefficiency and conflict to peace and optimization? Dr. Watson laughed, a sound that seemed to startle the alien delegation. It's not that we prefer conflict, but we value the freedom to make our own choices, even bad ones. We've found that the messiness of freedom often produces better results than the efficiency of control. She gestured toward the human delegation. Look at us. We come from dozens of different countries, cultures, and belief systems. We disagree about almost everything. Yet here we stand, united in greeting you as representatives of our entire species. That unity came not from imposed order, but from choosing to work together despite our differences. Ambassador Thane's translation device made several clicking sounds before he responded. This is not how first contact typically proceeds. Species usually express gratitude for our guidance and eagerly accept integration into galactic civilization. Well, Dr. Watson said with another smile, I suppose that's the first sign that we might be different. We tend to ask why and what if, rather than simply accepting what we're told, even from beings as advanced as yourselves. The alien delegation huddled together in what appeared to be an urgent conference. Their various sounds, clicks, hums, and chimes created an alien symphony of confusion. When they separated, Ambassador Thane's expression had shifted to something that might have been concern. Perhaps we have moved too quickly. May we request accommodation while we reassess our approach to your species? Of course, Dr. Watson replied warmly. We'd be happy to be your hosts while you consider your next steps. And who knows, maybe we can learn from each other. As the formal ceremony concluded and arrangements were made for the aliens' stay, Dr. Watson couldn't shake the feeling that this first contact was about to become far more interesting than anyone had planned. 3 weeks had passed since the alien delegation arrived, and Commander Vax was growing increasingly frustrated with what he saw as human stubbornness. Standing in the specially constructed meeting hall, he gestured toward the massive holographic display showing his fleet's capabilities. Dozens of warships hung in the darkness of space, each one capable of reducing Earth's cities to ash within hours. "Observe the Hegemony's 7th Fleet," he announced to the assembled human representatives. "Each vessel contains enough firepower to eliminate all resistance on a planetary surface. Our defensive shields can withstand your most powerful weapons without taking damage. This is the military might that protects all Council worlds from chaos and disorder." Dr. Tom Allen, a former military officer turned peace negotiator, studied the display with professional interest. "Impressive technology, Commander. Those ships must have cost enormous resources to build and maintain." "The expense is justified by the results," Vax replied proudly. "No Council world has experienced warfare in over 800 years. Perfect peace through superior strength." "And what exactly do you use them for?" asked Dr. Watson, who had become the primary human liaison with the delegation. The question seemed to puzzle the commander. "Use them for? They exist to maintain peace. Their presence prevents conflict." Dr. Allen leaned forward in his chair. "But if there's no conflict to prevent, what do the crews do all day?" "They maintain readiness through simulation exercises and equipment maintenance," Vax explained. "The fleet must remain prepared for any potential threat." "What kind of threats?" Dr. Watson pressed gently. Commander Vax paused, his mechanical implants clicking as he processed the question. "Theoretical threats, the possibility of disorder, the chance that some world might reject Council authority?" Dr. Allen nodded slowly. "So you maintain a massive military force to fight enemies that don't exist?" "The enemies do not exist, because the force exists," Vax countered, though he sounded less certain than before. Before anyone could respond, economist Prime Kill activated its own presentation. The hologram shifted to show sprawling cities on various worlds, all nearly identical in their geometric perfection. "Perhaps military displays are too abstract," Kill said in its synthesized voice. "Let me demonstrate the prosperity our economic systems have brought to the galaxy." The display zoomed in on one of the cities, showing millions of beings moving in perfectly choreographed patterns. Every building was the same height, every street the same width, every public space filled with identical amenities. "This is New Rigel, home to 12 million citizens," Kill announced. "Every individual receives exactly what they need for optimal function. There is no waste, no want, no economic inequality. Resources are distributed according to proven algorithms that eliminate inefficiency." Dr. Sarah Martinez, Earth's chief economist, watched the display with growing amazement. "It's certainly organized. What happens if someone wants something that isn't on the approved list?" "Want is an irrational concept," Kill replied. "Our algorithms determine what each individual requires for maximum productivity and contentment. Personal preferences that deviate from optimal standards create inefficiency." "But what about innovation?" Dr. Martinez asked. "How do you develop new products or services if no one can want something that doesn't already exist?" The question seemed to short-circuit something in Kill's programming. The economic data flickered and repeated several times before the alien could respond. "Innovation occurs through planned research initiatives approved by the Council. Unnecessary innovation is prevented to avoid resource waste." Dr. Watson exchanged a look with her colleagues. "Could you give us an example of a recent innovation?" Kill's display showed a series of technical diagrams. 17 years ago, we improved the efficiency of our food distribution networks by 0.3%. This saved the equivalent of 12 tons of resources annually across all Council worlds. 17 years? Dr. Martinez repeated. "That's your most recent innovation?" "Significant changes occur rarely in optimal systems," the Altarian delegate interjected, its crystalline form refracting the holographic light. "I am Philosopher Neth. keeper of wisdom for my people. Allow me to share the deeper truths that guide our civilization." The display shifted again, showing ancient texts and scrolling symbols. These are the fundamental principles, discovered by our greatest minds over 10,000 years ago. They contain all the wisdom necessary for proper living. Every major question has been answered, every important truth revealed. Dr. James Park, a professor of philosophy from Seoul National University, studied the symbols with interest. These principles must be very comprehensive. What do they say about the meaning of existence? Existence serves the purpose of maintaining optimal social function, Neth replied without hesitation. Individuals exist to contribute to the collective good according to their designated roles. And what if someone finds a different meaning in their existence? Dr. Park asked. Alternative meanings create cognitive dissonance and social disruption, Neth stated. Such thoughts are corrected through counseling and, if necessary, neural adjustment. The human delegation fell silent. Dr. Watson felt a chill run down her spine at the casual mention of neural adjustment, but she kept her expression neutral. "Your worlds must be very peaceful," she said carefully. "Perfectly peaceful," Ambassador Thane confirmed. "No crime, no conflict, no unnecessary emotional disturbances. Citizens wake each day knowing exactly what is expected of them and finding satisfaction in fulfilling those expectations." Dr. Alex Rivera, a cultural anthropologist, had been quiet throughout the presentations. Now he spoke up. "What about art, music, stories?" The floating jellyfish creature bobbed forward. "I am Curator Zeph, responsible for approved cultural expressions. We maintain extensive libraries of optimal entertainment designed to promote social harmony and mental health. Could we see some examples?" Dr. Rivera asked. The display showed images of identical sculptures, musical notation that followed rigid mathematical patterns, and pages of text that read like instruction manuals written in poetic form. All cultural expressions are created by our finest artists working within proven aesthetic guidelines, Zeph explained. These works eliminate the confusion and distress caused by abstract or challenging art forms. Dr. Rivera stared at the bland, sterile examples. They're all the same. Where's the creativity, the personal expression, the questions and challenges that make art meaningful? Personal expression is inefficient, Zeph replied. Why create variations when we have already identified the optimal forms? These works provide exactly the cultural nourishment required for psychological health. Dr. Watson looked around the room at her colleagues, seeing the same mixture of fascination and horror she felt herself. These beings had achieved everything they claimed: perfect peace, prosperity, and order. Yet something essential seemed to be missing from their civilization. "May I ask you all a question?" she said finally. "When did you last experience surprise?" The alien delegation exchanged looks of confusion. Ambassador Thane spoke first. "Surprise indicates a failure in planning or prediction. Optimal systems eliminate surprises." "What about joy? Wonder? The excitement of discovering something new?" "These emotions are biochemical inefficiencies," Commander Vax stated. "Council citizens experience contentment and purposefulness, which are far more stable states." Dr. Watson felt a strange mix of pity and amusement. "You've solved all the wrong problems. You've eliminated not just suffering, but everything that makes existence meaningful." The aliens stared at her in incomprehension. How could eliminating problems be wrong? How could perfection be insufficient? But as the meeting ended and the aliens returned to their quarters to process this latest bewildering human response, seeds of doubt began to grow in minds that hadn't questioned their fundamental assumptions in centuries. For the first time, in their perfectly ordered lives, some of them began to wonder what they might have lost in their pursuit of optimization. The revolution had begun with a simple question: When did you last experience surprise? And none of them could remember. The tension in the assembly hall had been building for days. Ambassador Thane stood before the human delegation, his forearms gesturing with increasing agitation. His usual calm demeanor had cracked after weeks of what he saw as humanity's inexplicable resistance to obviously superior solutions. Your species displays a level of irrationality that borders on mental dysfunction, he declared, his translation device struggling to convey the full frustration in his voice. We have offered you perfection itself, the elimination of war, poverty, crime, and social discord. Yet you persist in clinging to your chaotic, destructive ways of life. Dr. Watson sat calmly in her chair, her tablet forgotten in her lap. Around her, the other human representatives maintained their composure, though she could see the strain in their faces. This conversation had been repeated in various forms for weeks, with the aliens growing increasingly bewildered and hostile toward humanity's refusal to embrace their gifts. You speak of diversity as if it were a virtue, Thane continued, pacing back and forth. But diversity creates conflict. Different opinions lead to arguments. Different cultures produce misunderstandings. Different economic systems generate inequality. We have eliminated all of these problems. Commander Vax stepped forward, his mechanical parts whirring ominously. Your own history proves our point. How many wars have you fought? How many millions have died in your conflicts? How many resources have you wasted on weapons instead of progress? Economist Prime Kill added its synthesized voice to the chorus. Your economic systems are disasters waiting to happen. Market crashes, unemployment, business failures. All of these inefficiencies could be eliminated with proper central planning. The tree-like being rustled its leaves in what might have been agreement. Your environmental destruction alone should convince you of your system's failures. Council worlds maintain perfect ecological balance through careful resource management. Philosopher, Neth's crystalline form refracted the light into sharp patterns. Most disturbing of all is your acceptance of uncertainty. You claim to value freedom, but freedom without proper guidance leads only to chaos and suffering. We offer you wisdom accumulated over millennia, and you reject it for what? The right to make mistakes? Ambassador Thane stopped pacing and faced Dr. Watson directly. Your chaotic nature will lead to your extinction within a century. Your climate instability, resource depletion, and social conflicts are already accelerating beyond your ability to control them. We offer salvation, and you respond with stubbornness born of pride and ignorance. The hall fell silent except for the soft hum of the translation devices. Dr. Watson looked around at her colleagues, seeing determination in their faces despite the alien's harsh words. She stood slowly, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Then she began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle, but it grew into genuine, hearty laughter that echoed through the assembly hall. The sound seemed to hit the alien delegation like a physical force, causing them to step backward in alarm and confusion. You think we don't know that? Dr. Watson managed to say between bursts of laughter. You think we haven't noticed that? We're a disaster waiting to happen? Her laughter was infectious. Dr. Allen started chuckling, then Dr. Martinez joined in. Within moments, the entire human delegation was laughing, not mockingly, but with genuine amusement at the situation. We've been predicting our own extinction for centuries, Dr. Watson continued, wiping tears from her eyes. Climate change, nuclear war, asteroid impacts, artificial intelligence uprising, resource depletion, overpopulation, solar flares, supervolcanic eruptions. We have apocalypse bingo cards. Dr. Allen stood up, still grinning. In the 1960s, we were certain we'd all die in nuclear fire. In the 1970s, it was going to be an ice age. The 1980s brought acid rain and ozone depletion. The 1990s had us worried about Y2K ending civilization. Don't forget the killer bees, Dr. Martinez added, causing another wave of laughter. and the population bomb that was supposed to cause mass starvation by the year 2000. Dr. Park joined the conversation. Every generation thinks they're living through the end times. It's practically a human tradition. The alien delegation stood frozen, their various forms of expression registering complete bewilderment. This was not how intelligent beings were, supposed to respond to existential threats. Dr. Watson composed herself enough to address their confused guests. The beautiful thing about humans is that we've always been on the verge of extinction, and somehow we keep muddling through. Not through perfect planning or superior systems, but through pure, stubborn adaptability. She gestured toward a wall display showing images from Earth's history. Look at our greatest disasters. The Black Death killed a third of Europe, but led to the Renaissance. 2 world wars nearly destroyed our civilization, but they also drove us to space and gave us the United Nations. The Industrial Revolution poisoned our air and water, but when we noticed, we cleaned them up again. Dr. Rivera stepped forward, his expression animated. You want to know why we value chaos? Because that's where the magic happens. Jazz music came from musicians breaking the rules. Democracy emerged from people rejecting perfect autocracy. Scientific breakthroughs come from someone asking, what if everyone else is wrong? Even our failures teach us things, Dr. Martinez added. The Great Depression taught us about economic regulation. The Dust Bowl taught us about environmental stewardship. Every catastrophe makes us slightly wiser for the next one. Ambassador Thane's translator made several alarmed sounds before producing words. You take pride in your failures. You celebrate your near extinctions. Not celebrate, Dr. Watson corrected, her laughter subsiding into a warm smile. But we don't hide from them either. They're part of what makes us human. Perfect beings like yourselves might see our flaws as weaknesses, but they're actually our greatest strengths. She walked over to the wall display and pulled up an image of Earth from space, blue and green and beautiful in its imperfection. You offer us a galaxy where every world looks the same, where every being thinks the same thoughts, where nothing ever changes or grows or surprises anyone. That's not paradise to us. That's death. The human delegation nodded in agreement. Dr. Park spoke quietly but clearly. We choose beautiful imperfection over sterile perfection. We choose the right to be wrong over the obligation to be right. We choose growth over stagnation, even if growth is messy and sometimes painful. But why? Philosopher Neth's crystalline form flickered with confusion. Why choose suffering when you could have contentment? Why choose uncertainty when you could have knowledge? Why choose conflict when you could have peace? Dr. Watson's smile became even warmer. Because that's where life actually happens. In the spaces between certainty and doubt, between success and failure, between what we know and what we're trying to figure out. That's where love grows, where art is born, where discoveries are made. She looked at each of the alien delegates in turn. You've achieved everything you say you wanted. Perfect peace, perfect order, perfect knowledge. But when was the last time any of you felt truly alive? When did you last have a conversation that surprised you? Or discover something that changed how you see the universe, or create something that no one had ever imagined before? The silence that followed her question was profound and telling. The alien delegation stood motionless, their perfect systems suddenly feeling less like achievements and more like cages. For the first time in their long, orderly lives, they had no response that felt adequate to the challenge humanity had just presented. Light years away from Earth, in the crystalline spires of the Galactic Council's headquarters on Nexus Station, emergency sessions had been running continuously for 3 days. The council chamber, normally a place of serene order, buzzed with unprecedented activity as representatives from across the galaxy tried to process reports from the Human Contact Mission. Supreme Coordinator Melk, an ancient being whose species had helped found the Council eons ago, floated in the center of the chamber as holographic displays showed data streams from dozens of observation posts. The readings made no sense according to their perfectly calibrated psychological models. The human response patterns defy all established protocols, announced Analysis Director Korn, its tentacles dancing across control surfaces. They show no fear of superior technology, no awe at our achievements, no desire for the stability we offer. Most disturbing, they appear to find our perfection amusing. Murmurs of distress rippled through the assembled delegates. Species that had not communicated directly in centuries were now engaged in heated debates about what this human anomaly might mean for galactic civilization. Perhaps the initial contact team misunderstood their responses, suggested Elder Vin of the Tau Ceti Collective. No rational species could prefer chaos to order. But even as the official debates continued, something else was happening throughout the galaxy. On worlds that had known perfect order for hundreds of generations, small cracks were beginning to appear in the foundation of absolute certainty. On the industrial world of Kepler 442b, a young Rigelian maintenance worker named Dex paused in his precisely scheduled duties. He had been assigned the same task for 7 years, inspecting Manufacturing Unit 47B for efficiency deviations. Today, for reasons he could not explain, he found himself wondering what would happen if he inspected a different unit instead. The thought was so alien to his conditioning that it made him dizzy. Citizens did not deviate from assigned tasks. Deviation created inefficiency. Inefficiency was illogical. Yet the question persisted, what if he chose differently? Similar thoughts were occurring to beings across the galaxy who had never experienced such mental rebellion before. On the academic planet of Vega 7, a research assistant named Thyra discovered herself questioning whether their 1,000-year-old mathematical proofs might have alternative solutions. On the arts world of Altair 3, a sculptor found her hands, moving in patterns that did not match any approved aesthetic category. The effect was spreading faster than the Council had anticipated. Covert observation teams sent to monitor other species were reporting similar disturbances. Young beings were asking questions that had not been asked in centuries. Workers were suggesting modifications to perfectly functioning systems. Artists were creating works that fell outside established parameters. Most alarming of all, some of them were laughing. The sound was being recorded on worlds where laughter had been eliminated as an inefficient emotional expression. Council psychologists studied the audio files with growing alarm, unable to understand how such chaotic vocalizations could spread like a contagion. Back on Earth, the Human-Alien Cultural Exchange Program was producing results that no one had expected. Dr. Watson had suggested that instead of formal presentations, the aliens might enjoy experiencing human activities firsthand. The suggestion had been met with skeptical interest, but some of the younger delegation members had agreed to participate. Curator Zeph, the jellyfish-like being responsible for approved cultural expressions, found itself at a human jazz club in New Orleans. The music made no mathematical sense. Instruments played in patterns that violated harmonic principles, rhythms shifted without logical progression, and individual musicians seemed to be improvising rather than following predetermined scores. Yet, something about the chaotic beauty of the music stirred responses in Zeph's consciousness that it had never experienced before. When a saxophone player launched into a solo that bent and twisted the melody in impossible directions, Zeph felt what could only be described as excitement. The sensation was so foreign that it took several minutes for the being to identify what it was experiencing. Meanwhile, Commander Vax had reluctantly agreed to observe human military exercises. He expected to see the same chaotic inefficiency that characterized all human activities. Instead, he witnessed something that challenged his understanding of tactical doctrine. The human soldiers were not following rigid battle plans. They were adapting to changing conditions in real time, making decisions based on incomplete information, and somehow turning their individual weaknesses into collective strengths. When their original strategy failed, they didn't consult higher authorities or retreat to established positions. They improvised. The results were messy, unpredictable, and absolutely fascinating. Vax found himself taking detailed notes on human tactical flexibility, something that should have been impossible according to his military training. Economist Prime Kill had the most disturbing experience of all. It had been taken to observe a human marketplace, not the organized distribution centers it was familiar with, but a chaotic bazaar where individuals negotiated prices, argued over quality, and somehow managed to exchange goods without central coordination. The inefficiency was staggering. People made obviously suboptimal choices, paid different prices for identical items, and wasted enormous amounts of time in social interactions that had no clear economic purpose. Yet the system functioned. More than functioned, it thrived. New products appeared without planning committees. Innovations emerged from unexpected combinations. Prosperity arose from the very chaos that should have destroyed it. Kill's economic models could not account for what it was observing. How could a system work without optimization? How could efficiency emerge from inefficiency? The questions were giving its processing units something that might have been a headache. The most profound change was occurring in the young beings across the galaxy who were receiving these reports through various communication networks. Unlike their elders, they had not spent centuries reinforcing their conditioning. The human ideas found fertile ground in minds that still retained some capacity for wonder. On a farming world in the Centauri system, a group of agricultural workers began experimenting with crop patterns that deviated from optimal efficiency standards. To their amazement, some of the variations produced more interesting flavors, even if they yielded slightly less total biomass. On a research station orbiting Sirius, junior scientists started proposing hypotheses that their supervisors dismissed as impossible. But the young researchers pursued them anyway, working in secret during their rest periods. The revolution was no longer theoretical. It was happening, one individual at a time, as beings across the galaxy began to remember what it felt like to choose rather than simply follow programming. The Council's response was swift and predictable. Emergency directives were issued forbidding unauthorized research, creative experiments, and efficiency deviations. Counseling centers reported increasing numbers of young beings requiring attitude adjustment. Security forces were placed on high alert for signs of social disruption, but the ideas had already taken root. For the first time in galactic history, perfection itself was being questioned. The humans had done something that the Council had thought impossible. They had infected an entire galaxy with the dangerous idea that imperfection might be more alive than perfection. As reports of the spreading chaos reached the highest levels of galactic government, Supreme Coordinator Melk faced a crisis unlike any in recorded history. The humans had not attacked with weapons or technology. They had not conquered with superior force or cunning strategy. They had simply laughed at perfection, and somehow that laughter was reshaping the galaxy. The Galactic Peace Festival had been held on the same schedule for over 1,000 years. Every galactic rotation, representatives from all Council worlds gathered at the ceremonial amphitheater on Nexus Station to celebrate their perfect harmony. The program never changed. The same speeches, the same cultural displays, the same predictable affirmations of unity and order. This year was different. Dr. Watson stood at the edge of the vast amphitheater, watching as beings from across the galaxy took their assigned positions with less precision than usual. There was something in the air, an electric tension that had never existed at previous festivals. She could see it in the way younger delegates glanced around nervously, in how conversations seemed more animated than the formal exchanges of previous years. The human delegation had been invited as observers, a gesture meant to demonstrate the galaxy's welcoming nature to potential new members. But as Watson looked out at the assembled thousands, she suspected their presence had already changed this gathering in ways the Council had never intended. Supreme Coordinator Melk began the ceremony with the traditional opening statement, his ancient voice carrying across the amphitheater through perfect acoustic engineering. But as he spoke about eternal harmony and unchanging wisdom, Watson noticed scattered murmurs in the audience, something that had never happened in the festivals. Recorded history. The first disruption came during the cultural presentations. A young Altarian artist named Chris was scheduled to display a sculpture that had been approved by the standard committees. But when the spotlight hit the display platform, the sculpture was unlike anything in the approved galleries. Instead of the geometric perfection that characterized all Altarian art, this piece seemed to flow and twist in impossible ways. Light refracted through its crystalline structure in patterns that had no mathematical basis, creating colors that shifted and changed as viewers moved around it. The crowd fell silent, not with the usual polite appreciation, but with genuine surprise. Elder Neth, the philosophy coordinator, moved quickly toward the display. "This work does not conform to approved aesthetic standards," he announced, his crystalline form flickering with agitation. Chris stood by his creation, trembling but determined. "I created it after reading the human reports," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the amphitheater's acoustics. "I wanted to make something that had never existed before, something that would surprise even me." The crowd's murmur grew louder. On worlds where surprise had been eliminated as an inefficient emotion, the concept was revolutionary. Before the coordinators could restore order, another disruption occurred. A Centauri engineer named Tox stepped forward from the technical section, carrying blueprints that made the assembled engineers gasp in shock. "I've designed a new type of starship," Tox announced, his cybernetic implants sparking with nervous energy. "Not for efficiency or speed, but for beauty. It serves no optimal function except to make space travel feel like poetry." The blueprints appeared on the main display, showing a vessel that curved and spiraled like a living thing. It defied every principle of practical engineering, yet somehow looked more alive than any ship in the Council fleet. Commander Vax stood up in the military section, his mechanical parts whirring in distress. "This design violates basic principles of structural integrity and resource optimization." "Yes," Tox replied simply. "That's what makes it interesting." The word interesting rippled through the crowd like a stone thrown into still water. For beings who had lived their entire lives in predictable patterns, the concept of doing something simply because it was interesting was revolutionary. More disruptions followed in rapid succession. A vegan philosopher stood up to question whether their ancient wisdom might be incomplete. A Rigelian farmer announced that he had been growing crops in spiral patterns just to see how they looked. A group of young beings from the Tau Ceti collective began singing a song that had no predetermined melody, making up harmonies as they went along. The carefully orchestrated ceremony was dissolving into something unprecedented, spontaneous, chaotic, beautiful disorder. Supreme Coordinator Melk raised his ancient form above the crowd, his voice amplified to restore order. "Citizens, you are experiencing temporary disorientation caused by exposure to human irrationality. Return to your designated positions and the medical teams will provide appropriate treatment." But instead of complying, more beings stood up. They began, sharing their own experiments with imperfection, their questions about established order, their secret dreams of creating something new. Dr. Watson watched in amazement as a revolution unfolded not through violence or conquest, but through the simple act of beings choosing to think for themselves. She caught sight of Ambassador Thane moving through the crowd toward her, his expression unreadable. When he reached her, he stood silently for a long moment, watching as his perfect galactic civilization transformed itself before their eyes. "What have you done to us?" he asked finally, but his tone was not accusatory. It was wondering, almost grateful. Dr. Watson smiled. "We shared the most human thing of all, the courage to be beautifully, gloriously wrong, the willingness to choose, uncertainty over stagnation, growth over perfection. Around them, the festival had become something entirely new. Young beings were creating art without approval, proposing ideas without committee review, and most shocking of all, laughing together as they discovered the joy of unpredictability." A young Rigelian approached Dr. Watson, his blue skin flushed with excitement. "Dr. Watson, I want to ask you something that I've never asked before. What if everything we've been taught is only partially true? What if there are better ways to live that we haven't discovered yet?" Before she could answer, a Centauri female joined them. "I've been wondering the same thing. What if efficiency isn't the most important value? What if beauty and surprise and even failure have purposes we've never understood?" More beings gathered around the human delegation, asking questions that had been forbidden for centuries. What was it like to live without knowing what tomorrow would bring? How did they find courage to try new things when they might fail? What did it feel like to create something that had never existed before? Dr. Watson found herself surrounded by eager faces from across the galaxy, all wanting to understand the strange human concept of embracing imperfection. She looked at her colleagues, seeing the same amazement in their eyes. "The secret," she said to the growing crowd, "is that we don't actually know what we're doing most of the time. We're all just making our best guesses and hoping things work out. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But we keep trying new things because that's how we grow." A profound silence fell over the group. The idea that an entire species could thrive while admitting they didn't know everything was revolutionary. Curator Zeph floated forward, his jellyfish-like form pulsing with colors that weren't in any approved pattern. "Since experiencing human music, I have been creating sounds that serve no purpose except to express feelings I didn't know I had. Is this what you call art?" "That's exactly what we call art," Dr. Watson replied warmly. "The best kind. The kind that surprises even the person creating it." The revolution spread throughout the amphitheater as beings shared their secret experiments with chaos, their hidden questions about perfection, their dreams of creating something new. The careful order of galactic civilization was transforming into something messier, but infinitely more alive. Supreme Coordinator Melk descended from his platform, his ancient features showing emotions that hadn't been expressed in his species for millennia. He approached Dr. Watson with steps that seemed uncertain for the first time in his long existence. "For 10,000 years we have sought to eliminate the unpredictable," he said quietly. "We believed that perfection was the highest goal any civilization could achieve. But watching this transformation, seeing the joy on faces that haven't shown genuine emotion in centuries, I begin to wonder if we have been pursuing the wrong goal entirely." Dr. Watson nodded understanding. "Perfection is an ending, Coordinator Melk. It's a full stop at the end of a sentence. But life is more like an ongoing conversation, messy, unpredictable, sometimes beautiful, sometimes painful, but always growing towards something new." Around them, the greatest celebration in galactic history was taking place. Not the sterile perfection of previous festivals, but a genuine festival of discovery as beings across the galaxy tasted freedom for the first time in millennia. As the day progressed, official announcements began flowing from various worlds. The Altarian Council voted to allow unapproved art forms. The Centauri Engineering Guild authorized experimental designs that prioritized aesthetics over efficiency. The Vegan Philosophy Institute opened its first department of unknown questions. The galaxy's first unscripted moment in 1,000 years had become its first step toward a future no one could predict. And for the first time in their perfect existence, they found that uncertainty felt like hope. As the celebration continued around them, Ambassador Thane found Dr. Watson again. "Your species has given us something we didn't know we had lost," he said. "The capacity to grow, to change, to become something more than we were." Dr. Watson looked out at the transformed amphitheater, where beings from across the galaxy were laughing, creating, questioning, and discovering together. "The galaxy just learned how to be alive again," she said. "And that's the most human gift we could possibly share." The day humanity laughed had become the day the galaxy learned to breathe again, and in that breath, infinite possibilities were born.